Hi, I'm Byron Elton, Chief Marketing Officer of CancerVax, and I'm here today with a very special guest, Juli Mathews. I've known Juli for a long, long time. And in terms of full transparency, I'm married to her sister. So I not only have known Juli for a long, long time, but are extraordinarily fond of her and I admire her. And she has a compelling story about cancer to share with us today on CancerVax Stories. So, Juli, thanks for joining us. And you're coming to us from the Laguna Niguel, correct? California?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's great. So, Juli, obviously we lived through this with you, but your husband, Jan, was diagnosed with cancer, I believe leukemia.
That's correct, yes.
And went through, you'll tell us more about it, but went through extraordinarily traditional measures in terms of his medical treatment. And then unfortunately passed away. And so this is really an opportunity just to talk about, tell us when you first heard that Jan had cancer.
Okay, when he was first diagnosed, he was at City of Hope, and he was being treated for, they didn't know what was wrong with him really. And so then when they came and told us it was leukemia, and that he could possibly try this more aggressive approach if they took this additional drug, and if he wanted to. And he said, yeah, I'll take that, I'll try that. Well, it was supposed to extend his life another maybe 5 or 10 years beyond what would be normal. And it didn't do that. He suffered with this for a number of years, and he went through chemotherapy that is horrible. It was absolutely horrible because he had a bone marrow transplant, which means they had to do chemotherapy, get rid of everything in your body first before they give you transplant the bone marrow. So the therapy, the chemotherapy that he had, he got sores in his mouth, on his legs, open sores, lost all of his hair, and was just very, very, very sick. He couldn't talk or see anybody. He had to be in isolation. You couldn't see me or anybody else in the family. He has 7 children. They couldn't come see him at all because he had to be totally isolated from anyone because he had no immune system at all. Well,
so any contact with any sort of virus or something would be fatal, essentially.
It could kill him, exactly. Yeah. And he had to be very careful anything that he ate. So then they tried that, and then it didn't work. So eventually what ended up happening is that he was put on, they had to put him under almost in a medically induced coma type thing so that they could maybe try additional, more serious chemotherapy or something. And he just was never able to make it through that. And so he passed away as a result of that. And that was about 7 days that he was like that.
Yeah. So from the time that he got the diagnosis to the time he passed away, how long was that?
I think it was probably, I tried to get that number for you today. I think it was probably like 7 years, something, 7 or 8 years at the most, maybe less. I can find out for sure for you.
Now, Jan, and this is a question I've always wondered about. Jan had suffered a pretty traumatic accident when he was bodyboarding that rendered him not quadriplegic, but paraplegic.
Incomplete quad, they call it. So incomplete quadriplegic. So
yeah,
he almost died. It was a surfing accident in Laguna Beach, and he was air flighted to the hospital, trauma center, and he was they didn't think he would live, and he had to have surgery on his neck, and so he got that, and he got so many infections in his back, so had to have surgery after surgery after surgery because of all of the mistakes that were made in surgeries. And so one time they found that they had left a cottonoid in his back, so it caused extreme pain, obviously. And so we just got to the end, and they said, we don't know what's wrong now. And so then they looked at it and they said, oh, unfortunately, it's leukemia, and we don't treat it here. That was the Laguna Beach Hospital. And they said, we can transfer you someplace in Los Angeles, said, or you can go to the City of Hope. And so I already heard great things about City of Hope. My dad had worked there at one time, So we went to the City of Hope, and they treated him from then on.
So what was so they discovered he had leukemia as part of his treatment for his accidents? In other words, they weren't related.
No, no. Well, now looking back on it, now what they think is that he had had so many X-rays for his back injury to correct problems with the back injury that they think that too many X-rays is what gave him leukemia. Why he got
gosh.
So, but what are you going to do? I mean, the guy can't even move, and in fact, I remember when the one they found where that left a cottonoid during surgery in his back, the doctor asked me, do you know what the color spinal cord fluid is? And I had no idea. And he said, well, it's supposed to be milky white. And Jan was in the hospital bed and not conscious after surgery. And he goes, well, that tube right there is his spinal fluid. And it was black. He said, if that doesn't turn in the next 24 hours, we've lost him. And so fortunately it did, but then he couldn't be saved for very long.
Yeah. Well, from my personal experience, I mean, Jan was so remarkably positive through all this. I mean, I can't imagine the pain that he was going through and, all the results of the x-rays and the treatment and
24/7. He was in constant pain. They tried to put something into his back so that he could relieve the pain, but didn't relieve the pain. It was so severe. So he doesn't like to take medication. So they gave him all kinds of drugs and he just wouldn't take them because he doesn't believe in taking pills and stuff. So,
well, he was a doctor.
Yeah.
So he knew what that could do to people. Yeah.
So he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. But he tried everything else and he remained remarkably positive through the whole thing. And was very pleasant, never showed that he was having a problem, and tried to do everything that he would do normally, but then that became increasingly difficult and soon impossible. Because during that time, he had kids that got married and we couldn't go to the wedding because at the last minute something went wrong and we couldn't get up there because his kids, most of them live about 5 hours away in the Fresno area. And so we couldn't go. So it's just impacted his whole life. I mean, there's so many things. He's got 7 kids, 13 grandkids, and he couldn't interact with them, couldn't have life with
them.
And
they couldn't even come and visit him because of the threat of infection.
Right, when he was going through the bone marrow transplant.
Oh. So, of course, there's all, the tentacles of cancer are so insidious and they affect so many people. So obviously we know that the experience that he went through, what was it like, being his primary caretaker? And
well, I think a couple of things I think there's positive things and negative things about that. The negative thing is you watch somebody you love so much suffer so much, The positive thing is that you get to be with him. I got to be with him when he was suffering, and that's where I wanted to be. If there was anything that I could do, here's a guy that, who gets married after I was divorced, got married in my 50s. Second, that is unheard of. That doesn't, likelihood of that happening doesn't happen. So, and I have MS, as you know, and at that time it wasn't really bothering me that much. Jan knew that I had MS when he met me. And so he always said, I hope I don't cry talking about it. He always said, I just want to take care of you. That's all I want to do is I want to just take care of you. And so that was so sweet and everything. And I thought, well, I'm younger than you are. And so I'll live longer. I'll be okay. Well, then he gets this accident and then the cancer. And he felt so bad. Towards the end, he used to say to me, I'm so sorry because I just wanted to take care of you. And now I won't be here to do that. And I said, no, it's not me. Don't worry about me. I'm worried about you, So He was just wonderful that way. And so I feel his presence around me a lot of it. So
thank you for sharing that. So, and you can answer this if you like or not, but how did it affect you financially? Obviously these are extraordinarily expensive procedures. I'm assuming he had, I don't know if he had Medicare or good insurance or.
He hit the maximum a long time before. He had regular insurance, but he maxed out of that a long time ago, back when he had the initial injury, and because it was over $1 million, and I think that was a lifetime maximum. But then it had to be covered by a secondary insurance. We had a friend of ours that is an attorney, typically would represent the insurance company, and he was really good friends with Jan and I. And so when they started saying, Cambridge, no more treatment, you're out of luck, we're done, he intervened and wrote a letter. He goes, I know where the sweet spots are. So sweet spot is. So he wrote, and they said, okay, never mind. You're going to be treated.
Wow.
So yeah. So then he got the rest of his, everything was treated. Everything was covered by insurance. But had it not been, would have just been absolutely, I mean, we couldn't have done it. He would have died a lot sooner.
Well, and as you know, there are a lot of people who don't have friends like you have.
Yeah, I know.
And that's what happens. They either lose everything they have, or they, and at the end of the, we know how most of these things end. So
the end is the end anyway, yeah. So you die with nothing or you die with a little bit, but fortunately for us, we do, that's one friend of ours. And then he lived with his daughter for a while, and when it first happened. Then he lived with his son for a little while to take care of him, because he had to have 24/7 care. I mean, it wasn't something that he could have done by himself. I mean, he's paralyzed, so that was very difficult. But again, when you are the caretaker, the sweet part about it is that for me, taking care of him, it was, I get to take care of him. I get to be with him during this time. And it brings you very, very close. But it's nothing I would ever wish on anybody.
No. Well, cancer is the second leading cause of death globally. And there's nothing good about it at all, other than somebody positive like yourself who looks for the good in it. But and they've made a lot of strides. As you know, the traditional approach to curing cancer is 3 things: surgery, which he had, chemotherapy, which obviously he had more than his fair share, and radiation. I don't know if Jan had any radiation along with the chemo, with the chemo. And it's tough. They're getting better at it, but thankfully there's a lot of really smart people around the world working on opportunities, in like cancer vaccine, which we talked about earlier. Matter of fact, CancerVax is working with the folks at UCLA about developing a universal cancer vaccine that would forego all of that surgery and chemotherapy and
another story real quick.
Yeah.
That might be helpful. A friend of mine that I do family evening with, his wife, I've known him for years. His wife died of cancer about 6 years ago. She had breast cancer, and she had radiation. She didn't have chemotherapy. She had radiation. And she just one day, he thought everything was fine. And one day he went in, she was dead. Just
gosh.
He went into the back. He was just talking to her, went in the room, and she was on the floor. She was dead. And what they said, what happened is radiation was just too hard on her heart. So cures, these treatments can be what kills you. I mean, if the treatment doesn't kill you, the disease will.
There you go. Yeah. So, and this isn't about me, but you know that I just recently went through not nearly what Jan did, but some prostate cancer. And it was interesting because I had one meeting where I said to the guy, and they diagnosed me, and what they didn't know was, had it spread, right? So the whole dynamic was, if it was contained, then they could treat it. They could surgically take it out. But they didn't know that at that point, right? So they said, we're going to give you some tests and a lot of new technology, and they're getting a lot better at it. And he said, hopefully it'll be contained. If it is, we're going to go in and take it out. And here are the ramifications of all that. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. I said, well, what if the tests come back and it's spread? And he looked at me and he paused and he said, well, then it's time management.
Oh,
I went,
we never want to hear.
Are you kidding me? Right.
Wow.
And he said, then it'll be how long we can keep you alive. And that was when it really hit me. Because as you know, I've been healthy my whole life. And
very active.
I hopefully we had a lot of years to go. And it was interesting. So they went in, did the surgery. We did 3 months. It was successful. Then they do all the tests. And to see, and then I remember, I went from a PSA of 14. And then the first time I had my PSA test 3 months after the surgery, it was 0.01. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I'm going 14 to 0.01. I'm clear, right? And he gets on the phone with me and he says, yeah, 0.01. I said, well, that's nothing, right? And he goes, it's something. Right? And he said, we want a 0. And I said, yeah, but 0.01. I mean, he goes, yeah, but it means there's still something there. And I said, well, where do we go from? And it could be growing and it could be a problem. I said, where do you go? He said, well, let's monitor it. So over the next couple of years, they monitored it and it kept going up, little bit. And that's when they came to me and said, we want to do radiation on you. We want to get ahead of this curve and do it. And I said, well, tell me what that, because I'm thinking, I don't know, right? Also, I'm thinking about people's hair falling out and, having no fun whatsoever. And he said, no, it's, you'll go in every day for like 3 weeks or a month, actually it was. And hopefully that'll take care of it. And then I said, well, what if it doesn't? And he says, well, then, we have a different conversation. And that conversation would be chemotherapy. And I will tell you, I can talk about it now, but I've seen too many people with chemotherapy, including Jan, right? And I told Linda, I said, you know what? If they come back to me and say, I think I'm done, I'm not going to do it. I'll say, how long have I got? Let's sell the house.
Right.
So I'm thinking, how many times, thousands and thousands of times a day, do people have these conversations with loved ones, right? Ruins them financially, ruins their health. They can't, they miss out on life's experiences. And I thought, surely there's something we can do, right? And fortunately, they're better at it now than they were, but it's still traditional. It's surgery, it's radiation, it's chemotherapy. But all the big boys and people like Cancer Vax are hoping that we can develop a vaccine, not preventative, but that can treat cancer once they know it. They can go in, target and I'm not a scientist, so I'm above my pay grade here, but they can go in, they can identify just the cancer cells. Wow. and kill them. Now, if they can do that, if we can do that, if everybody who's working on this, game changer, can you imagine the way that'll change the world?
Yes, it will. Absolutely would. To your point earlier too, a friend of mine whose husband died of prostate cancer, when they diagnosed him, he said, if I get treatment, how long will I live? And they said, well, you could probably, because it was pretty bad. And they said, you could live a year. And they said, well, if I don't get treatment, he said 6 months. He says, so I'm going to go through this for 6 months? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And he said, no, just keep me comfortable. Give me the meds to keep me comfortable. But for 6 months, no.
I would have done the same thing.
So CancerVax has a vaccine that's taken after you have cancer.
Yes, it's not so it's a treatment, right? So there's two kinds of vaccines, or there's lots of different ways that vaccines can help you out. When we're kids, they give a shot so that we won't get polio or whatever. This is one that after the diagnosis, instead of the surgery, instead of the chemotherapy, instead of the radiation, they can treat it with basically a 2-shot injection. Wow. That if we're successful, and when I say we, I mean everybody collectively that's working on this, it's a complete game changer because you forego all of the ravages of chemotherapy, which do kill cancer cells, but everything else as well, right? They just, to your point earlier, well, we're going to kill those cancer cells. We just hope we don't kill you in the meantime, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So listen, it's a noble effort. It's a worthwhile effort. It's a time-consuming effort. It's a costly effort. Our friends at UCLA are committed to this. We're funding, CancerVax is funding it, and we're very hopeful. But it's worth everybody's best efforts. And so listen, I really appreciate you spending some time with us here today, Julie. It's always good to see you anyway, but now I know stuff about you that I didn't know.
Yeah. Well,
and your story about taking care of Jan being a blessing tells me a lot about you.
Well, I should say a lot about him. He is such a wonderful man.
Oh, he was wonderful. I loved Jan. Loved him.
He loved you too.
So we've been talking with Juli Mathews about her personal experience with cancer with a loved one. So appreciate your time, Julie. And for more information about developing a universal vaccine for cancer, please visit us at cancervax.com.